I'm Liz Faublis, and this is Currents. How can you get involved in the Fortnight for Freedom? We'll tell you.
And so all throughout the diocese, parishes will be praying for renewed respect for religious freedom. That's going to happen in all our churches, every Sunday Mass, all the Masses during the next 14 days of the Fortnight for Freedom.
Plus, speaking out to save childcare and after-school programs.
They cannot balance the budget on the back of the children.
And the church is keeping pace with new media.
A good group here today, and I think they were here because they wanted to learn a little bit more about what Catholic magazines, websites are doing to kind of reach out to a younger generation of Catholics.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Our first most cherished liberty. It's the title of a document released by U.S. bishops last month in response to a number of concerns they see as threats to religious liberty. Now, at the top of the list, the Health and Human Services mandate requiring most religious organizations provide contraception, sterilization, and some abortion-inducing drugs in their employee health plans. Now, the bishops are calling on Catholics to take action in the form of a fortnight for freedom from June 21st to July 4th to encourage prayer, education, and public action about religious freedom. Baltimore Archbishop William Lori, chairman of the U.S. Bishops Ad Hoc Committee for Religious Liberty, talked about that Wednesday at the Bishops' Spring General Assembly in Atlanta.
The fortnight involves public action, yes, but it is primarily a matter of prayer and education.
Now, dioceses across the nation will organize events to rally for religious freedom, including right here in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Who can participate? Why should you get involved? What exactly is the Fortnight of Freedom, and what events are planned at local parishes? You know, we thought it was important to answer these questions before the nationwide effort officially gets underway in earnest. Earlier, I spoke with Monsignor Kieran Harrington, Vicar for Communications for the Brooklyn Diocese, for a deeper understanding of why the Fortnight for Freedom is so important. Monsignor, amid the controversy of so many attempts by the government to infringe upon religious freedom, and of course the HHS mandate being the most prevalent and raising the ire of U.S. bishops throughout the nation, when you first heard about the Fortnight for Freedom, what was your initial gut response?
Well, I think this is a great jumping off point to focus our attention on religious liberty, religious freedom. Clearly, our nation has a great history of respecting the right to worship. And nobody here is questioning that there is a right to worship that's not being infringed upon. But really, it's a question of conscience, living as we choose to live, that living according to the dictates of our faith. That's really what's at stake here. It's important to note that, certainly this is, the personification of this is in the HHS mandate. But you also see this challenge from the right with respect to the church's ministration to people who are undocumented.
And you raise a point prior to our actually getting underway with this interview. This issue may not go away anytime soon, and we are ramping up efforts to voice our dissent for the issue. But what if this does go to the Supreme Court? What if it is ruled unconstitutional?
Well, I mean, we would expect that the Supreme Court is going to rule on the healthcare legislation in the next couple of weeks. So this may be a very interesting time where the Supreme Court might strike down nationalized health insurance. Question that I would have for the Obama administration is that the church has long been a supporter of national health insurance. We believe that all people should be covered. You would think that the president would want an ally from the church in this issue, and instead what he sought was really a fight over a relatively minor issue in terms of the impact is really minor for a lot of people. But he chose to take a very big issue, national health insurance, his centerpiece issue, and he chose to inject it with a sense of divisiveness that is really kind of questionable. You'd have to wonder what was his political judgment in that matter.
And the divisiveness does not work because all it did was serve to galvanize the church. If you'll just indulge me for a moment, this is a national effort. At Baltimore's Basilica of the National Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, we're going to hear from Archbishop William Lori. He's going to offer a special Mass. Cardinal Donald Wuerl of Washington and Archbishop Charles Chaput of Philadelphia, they're going to celebrate a Mass On July 4th, we have Bishop Richard Malone of Portland also celebrating. And here, right in our own diocese, we're also galvanizing forces as well. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to be doing.
Well, I think the important thing is there are three components. The first thing is we ground everything in prayer. And so all throughout the diocese, parishes will be praying for renewed respect for religious freedom. That's going to happen in all our churches, every Sunday Mass, all the Masses during the next 14 days of the Fortnight for Freedom. Interestingly enough, the Fortnight starts on the feast of Sir Thomas More and Sir John Fisher. These were great martyrs for religious conscience. So it starts then, we begin praying about religious freedom. Why is this important for all of us who live in America? Second thing is that we realize that when we pray, that calls us in to do something, and that calls us to learn about the issue. So we got to make sure that we're informed on all the issues that are facing our nation. And lastly, we recognize that once we've prayed, once we've made sure we learned about something, that we're called forth into action. And so what we're going to be doing over the next 11 weeks is also doing a massive voter registration campaign, asking people who are coming to church to make sure you're registered to vote so that their voice can be heard on this very important issue, but on all issues that are important to people of faith.
And you mentioned earlier that a lot of this will coincide with the feast of really great martyrs. Is that by design or just by coincidence or divine intervention?
I think it's really by design. I mean, the 14 days that lapse between the celebration of the martyrdom of Sir Thomas More and John Fisher and our own national holiday, Independence Day. I mean, two very significant days. Our nation is founded upon the rights of man given to them not by government, but by Almighty God. And we have to be able to stand up and say to the present administration, and not simply to the present administration, also to forces that are on the right, and say, we live a certain way, we pray a certain way, and this calls us to behave in a certain way.
Monsignor, in the time that we have left, I want to read a quote by Bishop Malone, which really resonated with me. He said this issue of religious liberty affects all Americans. It's not a Catholic issue. It's not a Jewish issue. It's not an Orthodox, Muslim, Mormon issue. It's an American issue. In the time that we have left, can you address that statement and tell me what you feel about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, all throughout the world there were confessional states, states where there was one specific religion and everyone had to adhere to that religion. The United States really kind of pioneers the way and says that no, people can choose the religion way in which they want to worship, but then not simply the way in which they want to worship, but also the way in which they want to live. This is an important value not simply for our own country, but for what the United States has meant for the rest of the world.
Monsignor, I'm afraid we're out of time. We could talk about this forever. Hopefully we'll have you back to continue the discussion, maybe throughout the Fortnight for Freedom.
Great. Looking forward to it, Liz. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. The day's headlines coming up. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faubles. A Catholic and member of a Religious Freedom Commission saying an anti-Islam statement has been falsely attributed to her. Earlier this week, the Washington Post reported on a Muslim woman who filed a lawsuit claiming the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom did not hire her because of her faith. The Post article cited one of the commissioners, Nina Shea, as saying that hiring the Muslim woman would be like hiring an IRA activist to research the UK 20 years ago. Shea tells Catholic news agency that she never made such a remark, and the lawsuit does not claim she did. She does acknowledge objecting to the hiring of the Muslim woman, but says it was because of her views, not her faith. The article includes an online update noting Shea's objection, but its author, post-religion writer Michelle Borstein, has not retracted the attribution of the offensive quote. In the Archdiocese of Miami, the legacy of a Cuban-born bishop will live on thanks to his final act of generosity. Auxiliary Bishop Agustin Roman, who passed away April 11th, left behind a donation of $60,000 for the Cuban Diocese of Matanzas. The late auxiliary bishop was expelled from Cuba in 1961 along with 132 other priests. He ministered in Chile for a number of years before settling in Miami in 1966. Bishop Roman founded what later became the National Shrine for Cuba's patroness, Our Lady of Charity. He also served on the U.S. Bishops' Conference committees for Hispanic Affairs and Migration and Tourism. The posthumous gift comes as no surprise to Archbishop Thomas Wensky of Miami, who says Bishop Roman always maintained a great love for Cuba, especially the province of Matanzas. Well, less than 2 weeks after Pope Benedict announced that he will visit Philadelphia in 2015 to host the Vatican World Meeting of Families, the Vatican confirms he has added one other major country to his itinerary, and Rome Reports has more on that.
Benedict XVI will visit Beirut from September 14th to the 16th. The Vatican confirmed the trip after deciding the violence in neighboring Syria would most likely not spread to Lebanon. It will be a highly symbolic visit that will touch on issues of the Arab Spring and will be attended by representatives from across the Middle East and North Africa. The Pope will meet with bishops from the countries in the region, and there he will sign his first official document addressing the situation of Christians in the Middle East. Given the exodus of Christians and the social situation, there will be an important meeting with intellectuals from various countries, as well as a meeting with young people. Lebanon is the country with the most Christians in the Middle East. It is considered part of the Holy Land and home to the cities of Tyre and Sidon, places that Jesus once preached. John Paul II visited the country in 1997, 15 years ago.
An important opportunity to reaffirm the central place of the Eucharist. That's what Pope Benedict is saying about the International Eucharistic Congress, which is happening this week in Ireland. At the end of his weekly audience on Wednesday, Pope Benedict said that Christ becomes our food in order to assimilate us to him. The Pope invited everyone to be spiritually united to Christians in Ireland and to pray for the work of the Congress. And in Ireland, the Pope's messenger to the Eucharistic Congress has met with a group of sexual abuse survivors. According to Vatican Radio, the meeting lasted about 2 hours, with survivors sharing their individual stories and how the abuse impacted their lives. At Mass later, Cardinal Ouellet said that Pope Benedict asked him to go to Ireland to ask God's forgiveness for the times that priests sexually abused children, not only in Ireland, but anywhere in the Church. And according to numerous reports, the leader of the Society of St. Pius X would hear Pope Benedict's decision on restoration of the breakaway traditionalist group with the Church on Wednesday. Back in 1988, the Society's leader at that time was excommunicated after he ordained bishops without the Pope's approval. The bishops in question were also excommunicated. In 2009, Pope Benedict lifted the excommunications, a move that did not result in restoration of the Society with the Church. Catholic News Service cited a French news agency which was reporting that the current head of the Society, Bishop Bernard Fallet, was to receive the Pope's decision on Wednesday. An agreement to secure the rights of the Catholic Church in Israel may be close to finalized. Commissions overseeing these talks say negotiations took place in a thoughtful and constructive atmosphere. The Vatican and Israel have enjoyed diplomatic relations since 1993, but Catholic News Agency reports that there have been unresolved issues about the legal status of the church in Israel. Issues include ownership of church buildings and the taxing of church properties. A Vatican official says that despite reports out of Israel and Palestinian territories, the agreement would not in any way imply that the Vatican recognizes Israel's claim over East Jerusalem and the West Bank. The official told Vatican Radio that the agreement would only address church property in those areas. Well, a new survey takes the debate over same-sex marriage from the church and the political arena right into the home. Research conducted by Mark Regnerus, Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Texas at Austin, says children brought up by partners in same-sex relationships are encountering more difficulties in adulthood than their conventionally raised counterparts. On 25 out of 40 different outcomes, children of same-sex households led by women were found to have lower average income levels as adults, along with more physical and mental health problems and more instability in their romantic relationships, and that's compared to those whose biological mother and father were and still are married. Also prevalent among that sample group, higher levels of unemployment, smoking, need for public assistance, and involvement in crime. Now, the new findings challenge data cited in 2005 by the American Psychological Association, which claimed, quote, not a single study has found children of lesbian or gay parents to be disadvantaged in any significant respect relative to children of heterosexual parents. Now, Regnerus says those studies rely too heavily on small or non-representative population samples. Meantime, a separate survey suggests more of the so-called millennial generation is losing some of their faith in God. A recent Pew survey found that among Americans 30 and younger, 68% never doubt God's existence. However, that's a 15-point drop in just 5 years. Back in 2007, that number hovered around 83%. 31% disagreed with the statement, quote, I never doubt the existence of God, and that is double the number who disagreed in 2007. Now, despite the findings of millennials, the research part of Pew's 2012 American Values Survey shows that the United States continues to be a highly religious nation, with most Americans identifying with a particular faith. 76% of all respondents said prayer is an important part of their lives. About 80% said they have never doubted the existence of God. Stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. Coming up, it means a lot to these families. We'll hear how cuts to child care programs could affect them.
Without the daycare, I would end up losing my job. I have no one to take care of my child, and I'm not the only one.
Welcome back. Families, elected officials, and several community-based organizations gathered yesterday at Borough Hall in downtown Brooklyn. The reason? A call to restore funding for much-needed childcare and after-school programs. We were there and caught up with representatives from Catholic Charities, along with local leaders and the people most affected by those cuts, the families.
The purpose of this rally is to bring attention to the community about how the proposed cuts in funding to child care services and after-school programs is going to really hurt and have a negative impact on children and families that we serve in our programs in Catholic Charities.
This is unacceptable. They cannot balance the budget on the back of the children. The children, they are the future of the United States. They are the future of the society. It is our responsibility to do everything that we can do to provide to the children with the best education possible, including after-school program.
The children count on these programs as a place to get their homework done, to get help with their subjects that they're struggling in, whether it be reading, math, or sciences, as well as to get opportunities to explore their skills in art, music, dance, and physical recreation, which is such a big need. And as the mayor talks about the need to cut down on high-calorie drinks, well, these programs provide real physical exercise for children through a variety of activities.
It allows you, many of you, to take a job, whether it's full-time or part-time. It enables your children to receive the adult supervision, daycare programs that enrich their lives and give them the greatest opportunity in their lives.
There'll be many children and families who are not going to be able to get services that they need after July or after September of this year.
Without the daycare, I would end up losing my job. I have no one to take care of my child, and I'm not the only one.
Hundreds of young women that they depend on this center so they can have good care for their children and safe care.
I'm a single parent, yes I am. I'm a single parent and I do this alone. I have, little help from my parents whom are sick as well, but the daycare itself does so much for me.
The most important thing right now is that the city restore funding for these programs.
The cost of these programs is minor compared to what we're going to pay in future costs without these programs.
In addition to that, this is job opportunities. By closing after school, there are many people who are going to be laid off. And this is bad for New York City, this is bad for the children, this is bad for the families, and this is bad for the United States. We have to stand against that.
Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. When we return, logging on and keeping up with new media.
Social media is a great tool for communication, but there's also an inherent level of some of the social media that really can often be really shallow.
Finally tonight, the Vatican is trying to control a new internet domain. The corporation that assigns those names announced that the Holy See has applied for ownership of the domain .Catholic. The head of the Pontifical Council for Social Communication says the move recognizes how important the digital space is for the church. And the news should come as no surprise, since both the church and its people are increasingly communicating by electronic means. At a recent Theology on Tap in Brooklyn Heights, a couple of Catholic journalists talked about the current media landscape.
We're here tonight for Theology on Tap at Amon's Bar in Brooklyn Heights, and we're going to talk about Catholicism and young adults in the media today. We have Tim Reedy and we have Bill McGarvey, and they both deal with communications and media.
We live in a dialogic world where you say this and I say this back, and then this person over here says that. There's voices coming from everywhere.
It's very important at my age to stay connected with everyone. It's the popular thing to do.
The Catholic identity has been dispersed, and you're in a competition. We're in competition, really. We're in competition with everything, with people's jobs, their school, their girlfriends and boyfriends, their Facebook account, their Twitter account.
In the days of St. Paul, of course, they were very limited in the ways that they can communicate. It was either, in person or often by an oral tradition. Now there are, myriad ways to communicate, but in many ways things are the same in that the message is the same. So the challenge is how to adapt the message to the new media.
To me, a lot of what my work has always been about is about trying to see this faith in the context of the world we live in, and to have people give them the eyes and the lens through which to see a faith experience.
I personally prefer to get my email and think about it, and I respond right away. And when you do that, I think it removes the passion from it, so perhaps people can think more clearly.
We had a good group here today, and I think they were here because they wanted to learn a little bit more about what Catholic magazines, websites are doing to kind of reach out to a younger generation of Catholics.
We talked about tonight the dialogue of faith, the people interacting on the internet, the people sharing ideas, people having discussions. If we're not there, then the church is kind of left out of that.
Would Jesus go out there and get a Twitter? I think he would. I think if that was going to get people to come to the faith, he would do it.
We are a Catholic enterprise, yes, but one that is engaged with the larger world and looking at the larger world and trying to bring a Catholic perspective to it.
Jesus was able to go down to the Sea of Galilee and pick up fishermen. We need to go to Facebook and Twitter and grab people and bring them to Christ.
The idea was that we wanted to look at church issues, of course, but also kind of beyond the church, and to bring the lens of the Catholic faith to the outside world.
Social media is a great tool for communication, but there's also an inherent level of some of the social media that really can often be really shallow. I mean, 140 characters is what you have on Twitter, I think, right? I mean, you can't get across the gospel in 140 characters.
I think there's definitely way more value in telling someone face to face of God's love for them. Loving someone, obviously, person to person, sharing your faith with them person to person. But that doesn't mean it's not important, again, to be a presence in social networks, to be a presence online.
Social media is not the only answer to dwindling numbers in the pews, but I do think it pretty strongly that it is part of the solution to at least reaching out and helping people rediscover church.
And that is all for tonight. Be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. We are also on Facebook and Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faubles. We leave you tonight with scenes from Tuesday's rally at Borough Hall, where Catholic charities, families, and elected officials called for restored funding for childcare programs. Thank you for watching and have a good night.